Hey everybody, and welcome to the Disciples Download. I'm Pastor Jonathan Faulkner of First Congregational Church, and I want to thank you for taking the time to watch this video. Our goal, as we have prayed over this and worked on this, is that it might be a resource and a tool for you, not just as members of our church, but anyone watching this, to grow in love for God, love for people, and making disciples. We want you to grow in maturity in the faith, and part of doing that is providing resources that you can partake of during the week for the challenging and uplifting and bolstering and even encouraging of your faith. So this is a resource that is available for you, and we hope you've enjoyed the next 20 or 30 minutes, and that you take time to think through the discussion questions at the end, whether you're using this in a small group setting or just by your own for personal devotion. May this be a blessing and encouragement for you as believers. We love you, and we thank God for you, and we're praying for you. Thank you. Welcome to the first installment of the Disciples Download. This is an extension of our sermon from Sunday entitled, What on Earth is Happening Anyway? We took a look at 2 Timothy 3, 1 through 17, and I'd encourage you to go back and listen to that sermon if you haven't already before watching this, because we're going to build upon some of the things we talked about in that sermon. Now, one of the big topics that gets brought up when you talk about the end times is always the mark of the beast. And we always like to speculate about what it is. We always like to talk about what it will be. Is it coming? There's a lot going on right now about how vaccines are the mark of the beast or whatever, that people want to microchip you, and these are all speculations, and I'd encourage you to actually avoid these kinds of speculations, because when we come to the biblical text in a second, you're going to see that actually the mark is something different. We always want it to be a physical thing, but a lot of those things that are out there that claim to know what the mark is or will be are really just speculating based on and using fear to manipulate the way you feel about a situation. They want you to be afraid so you'll buy into their narrative. They don't want you to know the freedom of Christ, even though they may say they do, even though they may be well-intentioned. They're still using fear to control the way you react. So what I want to do is actually look at the text that the mark of the beast comes out of. And actually what we're going to find is that there's two marks. There's the mark of the beast and the mark of the lamb. So we're in Revelation 13, and we're going to go all the way through 14, 13 this morning. And the text will, you can follow along on your screen, you can follow along in your Bible. I'm reading from the English Standard Version of the text. So let's look at this. It's Revelation 13 and 14 through verse 13. So here we go. And I saw a beast rising out of the sea with 10 horns and 7 heads, with 10 diadems on its horns and blasphemous names on its head. And the beast that I saw was like a leopard. Its feet were like a bear's, and its mouth was like a lion's mouth. And to it the dragon gave his power and his throne and great authority. The dragon was Satan in the previous chapter. One of its heads seemed to have a mortal wound, but its mortal wound was healed, and the whole earth marveled as they followed the beast. And they worshipped the dragon, for he had given his authority to the beast, and they worshipped the beast, saying, "Who is like the beast, and who can fight against it?" And the beast was given a mouth uttering haughty and blasphemous words, and it was allowed to exercise authority for 42 months. It opened its mouth to utter blasphemy against God, blaspheming his name and his dwelling, that is, those who dwell in heaven. Also, it was allowed to make war on the saints and to conquer them, and authority was given it over every tribe and people and language and nation. And all who dwell on the earth will worship it. Everyone whose name has not been written before the foundations of the world in the book of life of the Lamb who was slain. If anyone has an ear, let him hear. If anyone is to be taken captive, to captivity he goes. If anyone is to be slain with the sword must he be slain. Here is a call, this is important, here is a call for the endurance and faith of the saints. Then I saw another beast rising out of the earth, and it had 2 horns like a lamb, and it spoke like a dragon. It exercises all the authority of the first beast in its presence, and makes the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast, whose mortal wound was healed. It performs great signs, even making fire come down from heaven to earth in front of people, and by the signs that it is allowed to work in the presence of the beast, it deceives those who dwell on earth, telling them to make an image for the beast that was wounded by the sword and yet lived. And it was allowed to give breath to the image of the beast, so that the image of the beast might even speak, and might cause those who do not worship the image of the beast to be slain. And it causes all, both small and great, both rich and poor, both free and slave, to be marked on the right hand of the forehead, so that no one can buy or sell unless he has the mark, that is the name of the beast, or the number of its name. This calls for wisdom. Let the one who understands calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. And this number is 666. Now in 14. Then I looked, and behold, on Mount Zion stood a Lamb, and with him 144,000, who had his name and his father's name written on their foreheads. And I heard a voice from heaven, like the roar of many waters, and like the sound of loud thunder. The voice I heard was like the sound of harpists playing on their harps, and they were singing a new song before the throne, and before the 4 living creatures, and before the elders. No one could learn the song except the 144,000 who had been redeemed from the earth. It is these who have not defiled themselves with women, for they are virgins. It is these who follow the Lamb wherever he goes. These have been redeemed from mankind, as firstfruits for God and the Lamb, and in their mouth no lie was found, for they are blameless. Then I saw another angel flying directly overhead with an eternal gospel to proclaim to those who dwell on earth, to every nation and tribe and language and people. And he said with a loud voice, "Fear God and give him glory, because the hour of his judgment has come, and worship him who made heaven and earth, the sea and the springs of water." Another angel, a second, followed, saying, "Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great, she who made all nations drink the wine of the passion and of her sexual immorality." Another angel, a third, followed them, saying with a loud voice, "If anyone worships the beast in its image and receives a mark on his forehead or on his hand, he also will drink the wine of God's wrath, poured full strength into the cup of his anger. And he will be tormented with fire and sulfur in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. And the smoke of their torment goes up forever and ever, and they have no rest, day or night, these worshippers of the beast and its image, and whoever receives the mark of its name." Here is a call for the endurance of the saints. Again, note that it's repeated, it's important. keep the commandments of God and their faith. Those who keep the commandments of God and their faith in Jesus. And I've heard a voice from heaven saying, Write this, blessed are the dead who die in the Lord from now on. Blessed indeed, says the Spirit, that they may rest from their labors, for their deeds follow them. Now, you have to understand something about Revelation. Revelation has multiple applications. That is, because it's prophecy, there's something that John is interpreting in the present moment, but also that thing has a future fulfillment. And it's supposed to be a peeling back of the curtain into the spiritual realm. It's not supposed to be literally taken. In fact, the 144,000, when people do take it literally, they end up looking quite foolish because usually those movements surpass 144,000, and then they divert back to what the church has long held as a spiritual 144,000. So this is a glimpse into the spiritual reality. Now, the other thing you need to know is that the modern interpretations of Revelation are just that. They're modern. They didn't exist, for the most part, in or almost anywhere until the 18th and 19th centuries. And actually didn't even gain a footing until the 19th century. And then don't come into the mainstream until the 1950s. So they're relatively new. They are actually in opposition to what the church has long taught, even the Protestant church. Some of the things that we've come up with, it would make Luther turn red, would make Calvin angry. And he warns us against the kind of foolish speculation about Revelation that has been prevalent in our own time and space. So when we look at Revelation, we're not looking at we're looking at a spiritual reality of what is to come, or what has been. Now, John is writing from the island of Patmos. He's been exiled under the second great persecution. Nero's is the first, Domitian is the second. And he's been exiled, and he's writing around the year 90. So the temple has been destroyed, and all these things are happening. And one of the things that the Roman emperors who persecuted the Christians did was require you to bow down, to become apostate to Christianity. They required you to burn incense to them. They were told, if you just burn incense to the emperor, just make an offering to the emperor, devote yourself to the empire, you will be saved. And so the beasts here are actually spiritual representations of the empire, what is being built around them and what continues to happen around them. So empire is something that never really goes away. That's the mortal wound now healed. The Jews had been ruled by the Assyrians, then the Babylonians. This is all in Daniel, by the way, the four kingdoms, the Persians, and then the Romans, with the Greeks intermixed in there as well. So they had been ruled by different empires, different people, who God actually tells Obadiah that he raised up as punishment. He tells that to Isaiah as well. And so they're ruled by these groups, and then once Christ dies and the Christians come into the picture, the Christians become heavily persecuted because they won't bow down to the emperor. Of course, neither will the Jews, but the Pax Romana kind of spared them a little bit, although Nero's persecution was against Jews and Christians, which is why he destroys the temple in 70 AD. because they refuse to bow down and worship the emperor God. Now you see the problem there, right? We are to worship one God, and that is the God of all creation, the God of the universe. And so what John is describing here is believers who and unbelievers who are deceived by empire. They worship the empire. They bow down to the will of the Roman Empire. And there are two images of empires here that were present in John's day. The first is the dominating empire that conquers through military conquests. The Romans would show up from the sea and they would attack from the sea and they would conquest from the sea. And then the second is this less evil looking empire. It kind of looks like a lamb, but it's actually got the same authority of the dragon, and the first beast, and this is the empire of propaganda that arose in the western half of the Roman Empire. And so these two types of empires are both mentioned here in Revelation, and they're in the form of two beasts. The first one is very obviously blasphemous, very obviously against God, and the second one is kind of subtly against God. It looks like it's actually for God. It looks like it's actually kind of like the lamb that's being described. But it's not. It's actually giving credence to the beast. It speaks with the same blasphemies as the dragon. It just looks more innocent. It's more subtle. And it actually makes people worship the image of the dragon. And the image of, and gives the dragon, or the image of the first beast, and gives the people, the first beast, the power to continue the persecution of all who won't bow down. So John's writing, as he says twice in the text, to say this is the spiritual reality of what's going on behind the physical world that we are living in. This is the spiritual reality of what's going on in the physical world. And so, Christian, be boldened by your faith, because deliverance is coming. And that's where the two marks come in. Now, again, John could not have contemplated the technology we have today. John was on the island of Patmos. He's writing on papyri. There's no way he had in mind the technology that we have today. And so when you read about the marks in Revelation 13 and 14, there are actually two marks. There's the mark of the Lamb and the mark of the beast. Now, these are spiritual, okay? These are not physical marks in John's mind. These are spiritual marks. These are not physical marks in John's mind. This is not something you can actively see, okay? That's John's intention as the author. This is again the spiritual reality of the physical world. And the mark of the beast is those who worship empire. It's those who are unbelievers, those who blaspheme God, those who bow down to the Caesar, who pay incense to this, who burn incense to the Caesar. And then you have the mark of the Lamb. The mark of the Lamb is all who worship God, who are undefiled, John says, by women. Now that's a metaphor. That is, oftentimes in Scripture you read about sexual immorality as a metaphor for what the people of Israel did, or people who go after idols do. That's a metaphor. It's not just those who don't have sex with women. That's not what John is saying. He's saying those who are unstained by the world, who haven't bowed down and worshiped the beast and its symbols and its images, but have worshiped God and been faithful to God and His way. In fact, John says in 13, those who have kept His commandments. And so we as believers then carry the mark of God. Our names are written in the book of life. And And we don't receive the mark of the beast because we are faithful to God. And if you're afraid of receiving the mark of the beast, then maybe you know some way you haven't received the mark of God. That's what John is saying. It's a spiritual reality. Those who don't believe, those who worship empire, receive the mark of the beast. And those who worship God and whose names are found in the book of life and who keep his commandments, they receive the mark of the Lamb. Now, really quick, we have to deal with this whole idea of people buying and selling because they don't receive the mark of the beast. This is something that many empires practiced when they persecuted the Christians. If you didn't burn incense to the gods or to the Roman emperor, you couldn't participate in the civic life of the empire. If you weren't willing to worship the empire, you couldn't participate in the empire. And the same is true in our time, or becoming true in our time. There is empire still to this day. We know it as colonialism or imperialism. It still exists in both forms, both the aggressive form of empire, the taking of land, and the propagandist form of empire. We are going to spread our influence through propaganda. Both still exist today, and both still persecute Christians, and both still demand your allegiance. And if you don't show allegiance, then you are an outlier and therefore persecuted. One of the best examples in our modern time period is Nazi Germany. The Christians who capitulated to the Nazis were taken down with them. And those who didn't were persecuted and killed and ostracized, like the great martyr and pastor Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Empire still exists. There is a form of nationalism out there that many believe today that says your devotion is 100% to your nation, and it's almost idolatrous in the way that your nation is plastered up as higher than God, and that is blasphemy. That is blasphemy. That God becomes whatever the symbol of that nation is, or whatever the image of that nation is, that becomes the God. And Christians are to avoid that. We're supposed to stay away from it. We're not to be a nationalistic people. That's why this whole idea that some have floated of Christian nationalism is wrong. We don't have a kingdom on earth. We are a people of a different kingdom who happen to live in the kingdoms of earth and follow the kingdoms of earth. So the same spiritual reality that was present in John's time is still present in our time. And there may come a day in our empire, in our nation, where we can't buy and sell because we are believers. But John has given us a bolster for our faith. He's given us a way to say, I know what's really true, I know what's coming, and this world is going to pass away, and I've already been delivered, just as Paul told us in our text from the sermon on Sunday. So Revelation is giving us the spiritual reality of our physical reality. What's going on behind the scenes. The mark of the beast is not going to be a physical beast, physical mark. It's not something that you as a believer can receive because you already have the mark of the Lamb. Right? So there's nothing to fear from this world. We have nothing to fear from this world. And we will all be delivered because we are a part of the spiritual kingdom of heaven. And there's nothing, no nothing, that can take us away, take that away from us. Not in heaven, not on earth, not below the earth. So rest assured in this promise. You are the children of God. He loves you deeply. He's given himself for you.